right, welcome back to the Footy Museum. This is the Footy Museum podcast. I am Justin Whitty, and I am joined, as always, by my co-director, Maria Van Dykenlee. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Justin.
How are you doing?
You know what? I'm pretty good.
Pretty good?
I'm like so.
Like a 1-1 draw
Yeah,
with
like
Brighton
a 1
good?
It was 2-2. Oh, man.
That was a wild game.
It was. You know what? It was exciting. It was Leedsy. I had a good time watching it. Lots of screams, lots of yelling at the TV. I think the last 5 minutes I watched through my fingers over my eyes like this.
Why is that so fun? What's the deal with it?
The unpredictability, the this could be triumphant or this could be a total disaster. The feelings week by week of loving and hating players. It's great.
Yeah. Well, Leeds are definitely in the thick of a relegation battle.
Yeah, they're the lowest they've ever been on the table. I don't care. Like I said, I've already decided to accept it, whatever the fate.
But they're within 5 points of like middle of the table. It's just so insane this year. It's going to be a wild ride. Anything else stick out this week for you?
Well, me and Jeremy, we didn't get to talk about this last week, but we have watched the last 2 Fire games.
Fire. I'm so proud that I am slowly winning you and your husband Jeremy over to the greatest football club in the world, the Chicago Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are your thoughts?
I've never seen 2 red cards given in a single game before.
And you're a Leeds fan.
They don't do a lot of red cards. They just kind of are bad.
Yeah, so the Fire did start 1 game late from the rest of MLS because they had a bye because there's an uneven number of teams this year. So their first game a week ago, they had, I would say, a respectable draw against New York City.
We had a good time watching it.
Yeah.
And I have all kinds of like new obsessions with new players, new to me players, like the man they call the Cube.
Oh, you've never heard of Shaqiri before? He's like
I've heard of him, but I've never seen him really.
He is a cube. He's
a
also
cube.
a lazy man, and he walks a little bit too much.
I'm fascinated by his calves.
Yes, they are square.
They are cubular.
He is. He looks like someone who stopped growing up at 12 and just continued to like grow out.
Yeah. Me and Jeremy always joke because we both have genetically large calves, and we're like, if we had a child, we couldn't because he would just be Shaqiri.
Well,
and
that's not such a bad thing.
It's too big. It's too big of calves. It's not fair to the world. There's no place like. How do you find socks that fit? How do you find pants that fit?
You just become a professional.
How do you find knee-high boots that fit? You can't.
Oh. But speaking of the Fire, yesterday I waited. I kept off all alerts, told no one to bug me so I could watch their second game of the season recorded or on Apple TV against last year's Eastern Conference champions, the Philadelphia Union, a team, even though I have a very strong connection with the city of Philadelphia. I used to live there. I love the city. That team, I just can't stand it. Their supporters drive me crazy. But I figured out why.
Why?
They don't actually play in Philadelphia. They play in Chester. So
that's
I
why.
have no problem just liking them. But actually, they have a very good fan base, very engaged fan base. It was a great atmosphere. The Fire played a very fiery, Leedsy game where they were hanging on 0-0, scrapping, fighting for every block, just trying to keep the ball out of their net. They did have what could have been a goal, kind of a poacher's goal by Kai Kamara that was called back. But then, in the second half, Fabian Herbers, the star of Game 1 who scored the goal, came in with a double-footed cleats up tackle, already on a yellow card, and it acted like, what? So he was gone and will be gone next week. And then later in the game, the 70th some minute, Kai Kamara. What did he do to get his second yellow?
I think it was just a really bad tackle, wasn't it? Or did he...
He came in with his knee or something?
Was it from the tackler or did he have an attitude with the ref? I can't remember.
Well, anyway, he got sent off too, so the Fire is down 2 players. And then you think it would have just been a porous opening for the Union to just run through. They still held on pretty well. And then in true Fire fashion, in the 89th minute
It
or
was
something.
late.
89th minute, they set off a very mediocre shot right at our 19-year-old goalie, Chris Brady, who totally had a howler. It bounced in front of him, and he almost deflected it into the side net.
It was pretty embarrassing.
It was bad. So Fire go down 1-0.
He definitely forgot how to be a goalie for a second.
It didn't ruin all my joy this week, though, because this week did start CONCACAF Champions
You
League.
love CONCACAF Champions League.
Because it's insane. Because it is a sanctioned sporting event that involves stray pit bulls running onto the field to play with a ball, large, mysterious, magical trees behind nets, and apparently different rules and definitely a different era of broadcast equipment. So it's very fun. And regular Champions League was going on as well. A lot of football this week.
Yeah.
So
Overwhelming.
so much so that we decided to focus on Peru because there's just too much going on elsewhere. So this continues kind of our tour of the world. It's been a couple weeks since we started, but we are going to talk about what is another fascinating footballing country, I would say. It was really, really interesting. So just a quick breakdown. So the Peruvian top league is called Liga 1. It is...
Or is it Liga Uno?
Liga Uno, excuse me. That sounds like a professional card-playing league. Like the
Liga
Uno
Uno.
League. Liga
Yeah.
Uno. What if Uno supported Liga Uno?
I think the
I'm
Chicago
gonna-
Fire just got their kit sponsor.
Do you know the Philly admin on their social admin after the game said, "Hey Fire, I got your shirt sponsor," and they did the Lou Malnati's logo, but except it said Lou's Malnati's.
That's pretty funny.
Jerks. Very clever, though. Very clever. So the Peruvian top league, Liga Uno, has 20 teams. They operate in a promotion relegation system, like all of the world, except for
The USA.
probably a few other places, but that's the one that stands out. So it was founded in 1912. Most of the teams are primarily Lima or nearby based, with just a few teams from the rest of the country. The big clubs are Universitario, which have the most basic crest I've ever seen. Just a U and a
There's
circle.
an interesting story behind this one,
Oh,
though.
I can't wait to hear. Alianza Lima and Sporting Cristal. They have won most of the titles in the league.
Big three.
And it sounds like their atmospheres are very different. The Peruvian national team is one of the top teams in South America. They're known for their ardent supporters, and also for their players that have a very creative physical style of play. They have been to several World Cups. They missed out on the last World Cup. They made it as far as the playoff game for the final spot against Australia, and Australia won, so they were not at the last World Cup. The national team plays in Estadio Nacional, the national stadium, which infamously was the site of one of the largest fan disasters in South America, 1964, in a game against Argentina, where Peruvian fans, unhappy with a call, stormed the pitch, and police officers fought back viciously, shooting tear gas into the audience, into the fans, the stands, causing a rush, a stampede. Over 300 people died. There are a number of notable Peruvian players throughout the world. Right here in the US of A, Seattle Sounders Raul Ruidiaz is probably well known to some of our listeners. And this amazing goalie for Orlando, who in the middle of this past week helped keep Liga MX's Tigres to a 0-0 draw in the CCL, CONCACAF Champions League, against Orlando, Pedro Galisi. So that's kind of an overview. And we were looking at the top division team crests, or I think we were. And there were some interesting things. What did you focus on this week, Maria?
Well, I don't know if you noticed this when you were looking. Did you notice a lot of similarities between certain teams?
I noticed a lot of fish-based crests, but and some
yours
very
is an
very
aquatic-
simplified.
You chose an aquatic mammal, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I did.
Just to be sure. What I noticed when I was looking is I thought I was looking at like the same team twice, a couple times.
Okay.
And I was like, no, that's not the same team. That's just a nearly identical badge from two like different teams. And so this week, what I did is I took a handful of different clubs and we're going to decide who did it better.
All right. I'm ready. Okay. I love it.
So,
oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Look
yes.
at that.
See, so before you, I have presented 3 escudos, 3 shields.
And we'll put these on the website.
Put these on the website. These are from Sporting Cristal, which is one of the top teams we've been mentioning. Mm-hmm. And then Asociación Deportiva Tarma, mm-hmm. or ADT, which is not as well known as Cristal, but has been 14 seasons in the top flight, so they're not nobodies. And then there's a third that is not top flight at all, but I was like, this matches. And it is from Defensor La Bocana, which is a smaller club further out, away from the like Lima metropolitan area, very far away. So these other 2 are somewhat close to each other regionally, and then the third is farther away. So this goes for all 3.
Oh, you're going to describe them now. Okay.
This goes for all 3.
Okay.
They are shield shaped.
Yes.
With blue and white color, light blue within think Chicago Fire colors actually.
It's like the Chicago blue for sure.
Chicago blue in the shield with a wide white band going across diagonally. Mm-hmm. And then the shield is split. So above that, in like a shorter section, is red and white, 2 red stripes and a white in the middle for the Peruvian flag.
Okay.
Within the white stripe, there is in the light blue the name of the club, abbreviated. So for Cristal, it's SC. For mm-hmm. Asociación Deportiva Tarma, it's ADT. And then La Bocana is just La Bocana. And each badge has stars atop. Cristal has 3 stars. ADT has 2 stars. Somehow La Bocana has 5. They're also on La Bocana. This is where we diverge. La Bocana's stars are crested above a soccer ball, which is positioned above the shield. And then on either side of La Bocana's shield, there are 2 sharks that are pointed to the sky.
They look like they made handles out of sharks, is what it looks like.
They have their
like cabinet handles.
Their fins are like grabbing onto the shield, like hands. I think it's an improvement, honestly.
Sporting Cristal mm-hmm. and ADT are almost identical.
Almost
Sporting
completely
Cristal
identical.
has the SC, and it's more of a hard-edged, squared. It's like a rectangle with a pointed bottom.
Yeah,
shield.
It is, but there's really not a lot of consistency in use throughout. Like the things are loose here. What I found looking into these, part of the reasons why I tried to decide who did it better would be a good way to go, is because the teams haven't updated their logos. There's very little change in all of these, which is quite like, how did this happen? A lot of people are like, ADT definitely just stole this from Cristal, but that's really not the case, because these 2 teams came into being right around the same time. Cristal was founded in 1955 by a man who owned the brewery Bacchus in Johnston. So the original name was Sporting Cristal Bacchus, which is a beer, and now it's just Cristal, which is also a beer, but they just lost.
Sporting Cristal sounds like a soccer themed champagne.
Yes, it does. But they had purchased a club that was founded in 1926. ADT was founded in 29. So these two clubs, their badges existed at around the same time. And I'm going to scroll down. And this is the original Cristal. It's TFC
Very
for
similar.
Tobacco Football Club. It's essentially the same, no stars, no gold outline. And then they updated it a little bit, still essentially the same, SCB with a more ornate font. But still essentially the same thing since the very beginning. Now, ADT was accused of stealing their colors, but their colors are actually based off of a regional school in the Tarma area that they wanted to honor. So it's light blue, like the colors of the school of San Ramon de Tarma.
So there's reasons.
There's reasons for everything.
They're very similar, but in terms of who did it better, I would have to go with the lower league. What's it called?
La Bocana.
La Bocana.
Defensor La Bocana.
Not only because the Sharks are so unusual in a crest, but I love their online version. It's just like, I imagine it. It's just like Photoshop photos of sharks.
Yes.
And it's what I imagine if the original purveyors of heraldry in ancient England, if they were introduced to Photoshop, they would probably do shit like that. They'd be like, oh, we can make it look exactly like that. Mm-hmm. And it just looks like a Photoshop one collage, and I love it. And that I've never seen two sharks on a badge or a crest before.
I think it's a really creative use of shark fins as hands. So
it is. There's something so happy about it.
For that same, you know what? It is joyful, and maybe that's because.
But of these three teams, Sporting Cristal is by far the most successful.
They're the most successful. Right. But with the least successful crest because they have no sharks. Moving on.
I chose an equally as interesting, and you've seen it, right?
Mm-hmm,
okay. So it is from the Academia Deportiva Cantolao. And it is from a team that's located in the Lima metropolitan area, but on the Pacific coast in Callao. And it is a rounded-edged rectangle with a name kind of just inside. And then in the center, there's a happy dolphin playing with a soccer ball. A very happy dolphin bouncing the soccer ball up. And their colors are yellow, black, and white. And I think it's completely charming.
It's delightful.
And it reminded me of a daycare center. And that kind of made sense because when I researched this team, what was fascinating is that it started as a youth, not even an academy, but like a youth organization, like ASO or something like that. And it continued to grow and they continued to develop it where they started fielding teams. And then a top-level team that just last year was promoted for the first time to Liga Uno, as we call it. Mm-hmm. And I love that story because it's almost like the reverse of what you hear with a lot of stories. Like the team starts and then they start an academy. And this club, their focus is still on the academy. It's like the top-level team's kind of like, oh, yeah.
We got that.
That's a side thing. So we're going to focus on the happy dolphin. It's a very, again, it has kind of a novice quality to the image, but it's so fun.
I think
it's really
they did
fun.
It right.
It's just great.
It's a happy dolphin doing what dolphins love to do, which is play soccer because they have the body parts required to play football.
And it's also... it's also one that I would, if I saw that sign, I would send a young child to go learn football there, and I would also buy one of their shirts. And they were actually scheduled to start off the season for Liga Uno this year, but that match, like all matches for about a month, were postponed because of protests in Peru. So I think one interesting thing that I really picked up a lot in my research, and I don't know if you saw that as well, is like a lot of American and South American countries, there's a complicated history in Peru stemming from its colonization by Spain. Mm-hmm. stemming from the diversity of different ethnic groups that live within its defined geographic region. And that's manifested in a huge divide between Lima, which is more of a Euro-focused, traditionally Spanish-rooted metropolitan city, and the rural areas that are much poorer, much more indigenous, and less developed, excuse me. So basically what happened is in 21, I believe, the first president was elected from kind of the working class rural areas. It was a school teacher named Castillo, and he was leftist and had a lot of support in the rural areas of the country. He came into power. The established Congress did not work with him very well. He was not getting anything done, and the Congress repeatedly tried to impeach him. Before the third attempt to impeach him, he dissolved Congress. Tried to dissolve Congress. It failed. He was removed. His vice president, who is more aligned with the right wing, Dina Boluarte, took over the presidency. A lot of Castillo's supporters didn't appreciate that, and they started coming into the city to protest. They clashed violently with police. Boluarte amped it up and had a lot of violent crackdowns, not just on the protests in the city, but going out to rural areas. And so there was a lot of turmoil, and it's part of a lot of history of protest and conflict in the country. It got so bad that even Machu Picchu was closed briefly for a time. I think, so it was also interesting to me looking at this club and realizing their start to the season this year was so kind of disrupted by these political actions. Made me want to think, learn a little bit more about the country and also how its history is tied into the culture surrounding football there. It's a very big footballing country. It's huge. So we have been fortunate to line up two different guests to talk a little bit about this, both from firsthand experience, both people that were from Lima and have spent time living there, have family there, and are both creative, come at it from a creative angle. Painter Emiliano Cerna and the designer Fio Bazo. So today we're going to talk to Emiliano. Emiliano is someone I knew from his time in Chicago. And so, why don't we just jump to that interview? So, Maria, since we are talking about Peru, there is an artist that I thought might be good to touch base with, especially since we talk about so much of this culture from a visual perspective and artistic perspective. Emiliano Cerna is a great painter that I knew when he was in Chicago. We actually went to grad school together. He now has his studio in Los Angeles and splits his time between LA and the chilly northern regions of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he was also born in Lima and spent some time there in college as well and might have some unique perspective. So here he is. Hey, Emiliano, how are you?
Hey there. How's it going? It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you. Thanks for agreeing to talk to us today. Emiliano, first of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about your work?
So I'm mostly painting, but I've also done a fair amount of ceramics recently. But I've pretty much always been a painter ever since undergrad. I just would diverge occasionally and do installation work or something like that. But I would always, and I still do always just come back to painting. And right now I'm mostly just painting. I guess I'm dealing with right now with still lifes as landscapes, you could say.
I was looking at them. They look fantastic, by the way. Did you check them out, Maria?
I briefly checked them out. It's been a busy couple days for me, and you sent me the text while I was in the middle of something. I apologize.
Just a yes will suffice.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I'm just full of excuses.
So Maria's a big fan as well. No, they really look amazing. And So before we were recording, we were talking a little bit, and you were saying that you've had a lot of experiences with your uncles going to matches or watching matches. Is that right?
Yeah, going to the stadium was a thing. Um, there's two main teams in Peru. It's Alianza Lima is one of them, and Universitario is the other one, and they're like arch rivals. And I have uncles who are fans of each team,
Oh no.
which is always fun. Because when they come up, when they meet up, they'll talk about the team to the other. They'll say shit about the. Can we curse on this?
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
should have
That's
asked.
fine.
Okay, yeah, they'll talk shit about the other team to the other uncle, and I always feel like that's just cover for some more deep rooted issues.
Oh no.
They just use the soccer thing, which is good in a way, right? You need a vehicle. But yeah, I have one uncle who's a big fan of one, and then the others. My youngest uncle on my dad's side is a big fan of the other team, so they would go regularly, and I think my first memory is maybe I was 6 or 7 or so, going to a stadium, to the main stadium, which is I think it's called the National Stadium, back in the day, and it was really fun. I mean, I'm not really like a big sports person. Just the way that the place felt after the game was over, just like the lights, and it was covered in confetti like stuff, or like those streamers they used to use, where they kind of fly through the air, and then it turns out they were like receipts of some kind, because I remember this young couple sitting near us, and the guy was like looking at one of these things, and he's like, "Oh, it's the receipt from the store or something."
Oh, so they're just recycling?
I don't know what they used. I wish I would have looked at it more closely, but yeah, I have those kinds of memories. The other stadium is like kind of dangerous.
Okay.
The Alianza Lima Stadium is in a pretty rough neighborhood, in a pretty rough area. So when I was like 21 or 20 or so, I used to go with my other uncle to their games. Maybe I went to 2 of them, and it's like riot police and mounted police, and like the fans are like super tense. It was not a chill environment before the game, even when you're kind of milling around waiting to go inside the stadium. Just trying to play it cool and just do whatever my uncle was doing, or trying to like act chill. But it's like you'll see like stuff flying through the air, and like things are pretty tense. But I remember this game, we sat at the very top row, and it's a small stadium, so if you sit at the top row, you can look at the field, but if you look behind you, you'll see the streets and the houses and stuff outside. And this game was just super rowdy and chaotic. There was like, those what do you call those things you throw that create like light and smoke?
Oh, like flares?
Yeah. There were flares going, onto the field, and I think 20 minutes in, they must have. I think they just can't. They called it off.
Oh my god!
Because of the violence. But I looked behind me at one point. It was like I looked outside, and there was basically like just groups of the fans. I don't know. I guess they were fighting. I don't know who they were fighting, or if they're fighting each other. But I just saw like the mounted police just like charge into them, and it was.
And you said you were 16 at this point?
No, this is when I was 20 or 21.
Oh, 20 or 21. Okay.
Yeah. And I just remember looking at the scene, and it reminded me of like those, the Garden of Earthly Delights, that painting?
Mm-hmm.
Hieronymus Bosch, like the right panel, where it's like hell.
Yes.
It just makes you think of that, because of the size of the figures that I was seeing, and just the chaotic nature of the whole scene. It's kind of imprinted in my mind. It's got nothing to do with painting, but somehow that's just what I think about. Yeah, I could see like like the field with the players, and then one player fell over because the thing landed close to him, so he kind of like fell on the ground holding his ears, and then I look behind me and I see like, you know, people getting hit with batons and just groups of kids running around and a lot of dust flying up and whatnot.
Do you have any sense of that, where that level of intensity is coming from? Maybe from your uncles or other people you know, and because most of the top teams in Peru are all in Lima, actually, or like real nearby. Um, but is it just a geographic thing where people choose their neighborhood team, they get behind them, and it's just about, you know, people rooting for their side and getting overly worked up and maybe working out other anxieties? Or is there other things at play from your observation?
It's all kinds of things. It's like everything. It's like your family has a lot to do with it. For Alianza, it's even got an ethnic component to it, because a lot of the players and a lot of the supporters traditionally were like Afro-Peruvian, and the neighborhoods obviously have a lot of Afro-Peruvian people who live there, and but I think even beyond like the regional or family thing, there is an element of like game day at the stadium is where you can go and do what's not allowed normally, you know, because you have it's like you have all the energy of all these people, and you're all, you know, they're from one neighborhood or from one team, but it's also like placed within this officially sanctioned um, context, because you're with a team that's a legitimate sports team that's known nationwide or even beyond sometimes. So you're affiliated with them. You know, I think of like people who have those college bumper stickers on their cars here, or like a veteran, or like or somebody who's affiliated with the military. Like I think it's like a symbol of prestige. You're like you're tied into something that's bigger than you, and it has like, you know, respect and presence within society. In this case, it just happens to be a sports team, but it happens to be in a country where football is like a really big deal. So it's not just any sports team. It's not like you're talking about baseball here. You know, like I think it's just so widespread in other countries. Like football is the sport, and I think so that carries, I think, this prestige that people wanna be a part of. They want to like be associated with it. So I think that when kids go to a stadium, when young people go to a stadium, there's that energy, because you not only have like this raw like youth thing going on, you also have it within this like institution that you support and supports you in a way. So all these things are like tied together. It's pretty fascinating.
It is fascinating. And
Yeah.
we've looked at it in different places and how it manifests, depending on the controls and the treatment of what surrounds it, I would say, or like the historical period in which certain fan bases have lived through, or are living, and how it manifests is so diverse as well. You know, like we were looking at in Serbia, you know, how that culture is so much scarred still by war, obviously, and ethnic strife, and how that plays out in the fan bases. But then you look at like MLS in the US, and it's just like capitalism playing out, and everybody's happy and like
Oh yeah. No,
you know, like jumping on, like I can dip in and out, and I don't really, you know, or I can say I follow a team that's 3,000 miles away, and it's just entertainment. And yet it's all connected by players who travel between these teams and spaces, and like different competitions where these worlds kind of collide. It is really fascinating. Would you say that there's anything about the game or being around its importance when you did go to school, or when you were very young in Lima, that has affected you or influenced your work in any way?
Well, has it affected me? I think it just kind of contributes to having a pretty diverse input of different kinds of like, visual. When you think about, for example, like protest culture and protest artifacts and banners, I've always noticed that there's this very like organic quality to those. Because when I was going to school in Peru, that was also a time when there was a lot of protesting going on against the government at the time. So we would go from the school that I was going to. There was a time when we were going out almost every day to protest. So we'd like be in class in the morning, and then after lunch we'd go out and stay out protesting the rest of the day. And part of that whole routine involved making banners and making signs and things like that. And there's some similarities, between that and what you see when you go to the stadium and you see all those banners that the supporters make. And some of those are just impressively huge, and they cover almost the entire stand in some cases. And just I really have always enjoyed just how varied it is, like how unique each banner is. And I used to just spend hours and hours looking at them online. And I would also see them. I remember going to taking the bus to my grandma's house when I lived in Lima, and I would, if it was a weekend, you would sometimes see groups of kids getting together with those banners, getting ready to go to the stadium. Because a lot of times what they would do is they would meet at the neighborhood, and then they would all walk to the stadium, sort of as like showing support, So you don't drive there. You all walk down the middle of the street with your banners, and sometimes it gets rowdy, but that was all part of it. So I think in that sense, I've always enjoyed just that, like the organic nature of the language that gets used and the objects that get made around these kinds of things. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
I mean, that's interesting also in context of everything going on right now, like over the past few months, with the protests that are ongoing in Lima. Do you have family still down there, and do you have any insight on the current protests that are happening?
Yeah, I think right now it's kind of calmed down a little bit, but yeah, my parents are down there right now, and pretty much all my family lives there. Not all in Lima, but at least more than half of them live in Lima. It's pretty chaotic, and it's also not unprecedented. It's definitely not unprecedented. I think Peru has had like 6 presidents since 2016 or something like that. So there's always this element of like instability, and something happens and it tips everything off. And I think this time it's been pretty in areas that are outside of the city, the capital Lima. It's gotten pretty violent and pretty destructive, and that's really I guess my level of insight comes from what I knew when I lived there, and that's kind of the background I read into whenever I see something recent that happens, even though I'm not living there anymore. So that's kind of how I read it. It's kind of just a cycle of very deep-seated corruption. It's really difficult to govern in that kind of environment. And I think in this case, it was basically set off because the sitting president tried to. I think he was basically trying to rule by
Dissolved
decree.
Congress, right? He tried to
Yeah,
dissolve Congress.
Yeah, it was basically a coup d'état, and
Mm-hmm.
in this case, he was like a left wing. I guess you could say he's a populist. For me, it's just I'm just always skeptical of any kind of populism, whether it's from the right or from the left. And it's like I say, it's really confusing. It's really hard to kind of come down on one side or the other. but I know that most people are definitely not supporting the current government, which is sort of like an interim, like provisional government that when this kind of thing happens, their job is to basically make it so that there can be elections and kind of reset things. And the main issue is like it's taking too long for that process. People don't want to wait.
Right.
The length of time that the government's it's saying it's going to take.
Well, it seems like the vice president Boularte, is that right? It's kind of assumed power, and everyone's like, that's not really what we're asking for, but also has cracked down on the protests pretty brutally. And back to the conversation, I think it's, I'm always conflicted when we talk about how interesting this game is and the complexities of supporters groups, because part of it, right, is people have everyday anxieties and frustrations, and like you said, they're looking to belong to something larger, something more important, something substantial, and football gives them an outlet for that ultimately can only point to one thing, which is winning some games, right? Or maybe a trophy. And I think that, like in so many countries, when you have, just like here in the US, when there's such a rural urban divide, when there's such class issues and other issues going on, where a lot of that energy could be put towards change, it's sometimes redirected. And I don't know if that's good or bad. You know what I mean? Is it an outlet or a distraction? So,
like a valid outlet, you mean, versus
like
just being
like a pressure valve, versus just as like a distraction. So.
Oh, right. No, yeah, that's one of those. Yeah, that's one of those issues. I also kind of have similar feelings, like some ambivalence about that.
Well, it is crazy, and yet it goes on and on. And you still periodically go to the MLS champion LAFC stadium in LA, right?
Yeah, I have a good friend who's a big fan. So basically, like I say, I'm not like a huge fan, but if somebody ropes me into it, I usually do go. So yeah, and it's a really fun team to watch because they win a lot.
Yeah, they're very good, and it's a cool stadium as well.
Yeah, and also talking about supporters and banners and things, they have like an amazing supporter.
Is it called
They're like
5226?
Yeah, it's 4 digits. I don't know
but that's the main one.
They are amazing.
Yeah,
so you were
really
in amongst
fun.
them? You sat with the supporters?
No. I was just with the regular people. I was sitting next to Snoop Dogg. I'm just kidding.
Just the regular
Between
people.
Will Ferrell and Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, because they always come up on the Jumbotron thing.
You're such an LA guy now. Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy, especially after humble beginnings is going to Alianza Lima games. It's very different. Like the LAFC is like the most progressive fan group I think I've ever seen anywhere for any kind of sport.
All right. Well, Emiliano, it's been a pleasure to speak with you again.
It's been a pleasure. I think it's so good to be able to hear first-person experience from like first-hand experience at these stadiums that we just kind of are stuck imagining through the lens of the internet. But to actually hear a description of like the tone and the mood and the atmosphere and like all the feelings involved with that, the excitement and the trepidation involved with that is really great to hear from first-person perspective.
Yeah, very vivid memories, very vivid. And I didn't even tell you about the part where I had to find a cab because I saw like 200 of these fans walking towards me after a game. I don't know why my uncle, for some reason, he would like just leave.
He just ditch you?
He would just leave. He would leave early, I think, to beat the crowd.
But he left you there.
Yeah, and the problem is with when the team loses, it's not good to stick around.
Right.
and there was no cabs. I was in the middle of this neighborhood. I had no idea where I was. I just knew it didn't feel safe. And I turn a
Yeah.
corner and I see this huge group, and it's complete silence. They're not like,
Ooh.
and that's even worse, right? Like
Yeah,
that feels
just
even
menacing.
scarier. And this guy swooped out of nowhere in a station wagon. I don't even think he was a cab driver. I think
Did he just grab you?
yeah. And he's just like, he was super chill, didn't say much, dropped me off a few blocks down the road. And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it.
If people want to check out your work online, where should they go?
Instagram, I think.
Instagram's the easiest? Just Emiliano Cerna, or?
No, it's actually my website is emilianocerna.net.
Okay.
I think that's easier because my Instagram doesn't make any sense, my handle.
Well, maybe there's a link from the website to the Instagram page.
There's a link. Yeah, there's a link. Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate
All right.
you bringing me in on this. This is really cool.
I've really enjoyed speaking with you again. Thanks so much.
Take care. Nice meeting you, Maria.
You as well.
That was a really interesting interview.
It was.
I think it's funny because he was like, I don't know if I want to talk. I'm not a huge football fan, but he provided a lot of insight.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was like just reading up as on a base level between like the El Clasico rivalry between the two Lima clubs, Alianza and
Universitario.
Universitario.
Sorry.
Universitario. Like you read it and you're like, oh yeah, it sounds like they're very different. But then his description of it being like very different is
like a party versus a war zone.
Yeah.
Emiliano is very thoughtful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to get his perspective as an artist and someone who has, experienced some of that culture firsthand, seeing how it relates more broadly to that culture, but culture in general, I thought was also very interesting. He had done, when we actually went to grad school together. He did a great piece that was also where he adopted the style of protest and soccer banners.
We should put that on the website.
We should try to find that. So next week, we're going to continue our Peru and talk to Fio, who I'm very interested to get to know.
Yes.
She's done amazing work for USL, a lot of different futsal clubs. So join us then. Anything else you want to say, Maria?
I hope that everyone has a wonderful week.
Oh, wow. Did you write that down? I hope that they listen and subscribe and share this podcast.